Hello guys, welcome to a brand new tutorial series on Linux. After watching this video, you will have some high level understanding of operating system, then what is Linux and its component. We will also see file system structure available in Linux, and in the end, we will see some comparison between Linux and Windows. So without any further delay, let's start. So first question that will arise to your mind is, what is an OS? OS stands for operating system. An operating system is a system software that manages computer hardware, software resources, and it also provides some common services to the computer programs. In another way, we can also say it is an interface between computer user and a computer hardware. That means computer user will be talking to operating system for their requirement, and then operating system will be handling those requests and talking to the computer hardware itself. What are the main tasks of an operating system? Operating system performs a long list of tasks, but mainly it is concerned with file management, memory management, process management, handling input-output files, and controlling the peripheral devices. So what are the main examples that we have in today's world for the operating system? We have Linux, Windows, AIX, Unix, and Mac OS as an operating system. What is Linux and what are its components? Linux is an open source operating system which is based on Unix. It is considered as the most secure operating system. And let's check what are the main high level components of Linux operating system. First one is kernel. So it is actually a core part of Linux. It helps in direct interaction with hardware and help application programs to work with the hardware. So you can say this is the interface between hardware and user applications. That is, whatever commands user or application want to perform using the hardware, those will come to kernel first, and then kernel will convert all those commands to hardware related format and get the things done using the hardware. Second is system library. It is a special functions used by application programs to access the kernel functions. So how to ask the kernel to perform some task using computer hardware? So for that we have system library. So that library contains a lot of functions which application programs will be using to communicate with the kernel. Third one is system utilities. These are the programs which are responsible to do some specialized tasks. How the Linux architecture is. So if you can see in this diagram, at the very lowest level we have hardware, which is your computer, processor, memory, and hard disk, and other components as well. On top of hardware, we can see we have kernel. So kernel is acting as an interface from outer world to the hardware. On top of kernel we have shell. So if you have already worked on Linux somewhere or another way, you might have encountered with the shell, bash shell or corn shell. So these are nothing but an interface between user and user applications and kernel. So whatever command user want to execute on the computer, they will type in shell, and shell will further communicate it with kernel using system utilities, and kernel will get those commands executed on the computer hardware. So after shell, we can have user applications or directly user as well. In the user application, we have an example of, suppose, VI editor. So user can open a VI editor application, and that application will be talking to shell to store or read the files. Next is Linux file system. This is one of the more important feature of Linux. So how the file system is structured in Linux. So on top of everything, we have a root file system, as you can see in this diagram. So everything on your Linux system is located under this root directory. Now let's talk briefly about few of the important components. Like we have /bin that contains binaries and other executable programs. Then we have /boot. This specific part contains static bootloader files which are required to boot the operating system when the system computer is getting started. Then we have /dev that contains device files which are typically under the control of operating system and administrators. Then we have /etc that contains all the system related configuration files. Then we have /home. This particular directory contains directories of each and every user which is having account to that specific machine. So suppose I am the user on one of the Linux machine, then with my username I will have a separate directory under /home. Then we have /lib. It contains essential system libraries and kernel modules. Additionally, we have /opt that contains subdirectory or directories of optional third-party softwares if we want to install any other third-party softwares. Then we have /proc, which contains information about processes running on the system. Then we have /temp. This specific directory is, or the file system is used to store the temporary files. And we have one more important file system which is /var. It contains variable system file whose data may grow over the time. It can be log files, packages, and database files. So that kind of data is getting stored in /var. Now last but not the least, let's compare Linux with Windows operating system. So Linux is an open source operating system, whether Windows is a commercial operating system. It's a file name case sensitive operating system. So in case of Linux, the case sensitivity is there, but that is not there in case of Windows. So for Linux, it is using monolithic kernel, but Windows is using microkernel. So now let's see what is a monolithic kernel. A monolithic kernel is an operating system architecture where entire operating system is working in kernel space itself. So all the components which are required to implement the operating system are at one place. And a microkernel is a minimum amount of software that can provide mechanism needed to implement the operating system. So in this way, Linux and Windows are separated. Further, Linux is more efficient in comparison to Windows. Also, there is a forward slash which is used for separating the directories in Linux, but in case of Windows, a backward slash is used. Linux provides more security than Windows. As we can see, Windows will have more number of attacks and viruses, but Linux will have very less number of such cases. One more important feature which is there in Linux is it is a multi-user. That means multiple user can log into the same server at the same time. That is not available in Windows. That's it for this video. If you want to play around with Linux on your Windows operating system, please do check out the same playlist on my channel, how to configure the WSL for Linux installation. If you like the video, please do like, share and subscribe, and don't forget to press the bell icon so that you won't miss any new update. Thanks for watching. Have a nice